They laughed when the little boy asked to shoot. Could this child hold a secret that stunned a base? Just a dusty afternoon, a forgotten rifle, and a kid in an oversized jacket. He missed the first shot, but what happened next made a colonel freeze, an instructor go silent, and left one question echoing across the range. Who trained this child? Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories. Before we continue, tell us in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit the subscribe button. The sun beat down on the Dustcake shooting range, an unforgiving strip of earth carved into the desert like a forgotten scar. The wind carried the sting of sand and the sharp metallic scent of gun oil. At the far end, a squad of young Marines adjusted their ear protection and checked the zero on their rifles, joking between themselves as the morning drills began to drag. A colonel leaned back against a rusted Humvee, arms folded, eyes half-lidded beneath his cap. He was here as an observer, technically off-duty, just passing through on a routine inspection. But boredom was settling in like the midday heat. Then came the voice, small, high, too soft to carry against the snap of gunfire and the low hum of military conversation. Can I try? At first, no one noticed. The boy had spoken to no one in particular. He stood near the edge of the sandbag wall, one boot untied, camouflage jacket swallowing his frame whole. He couldn't have been more than 8, short, thin, and forgettable if not for the fire in his eyes. The kind of intensity soldiers spent years trying to fake. He asked again, this time louder. Can I shoot? Heads turned. Laughter rippled through the line of Marines. Someone whistled. Another mockingly saluted. Yes, sir. Private Junior reporting for duty. Did you lose your toy gun, kid? The colonel raised an eyebrow, but didn't intervene. He'd seen things like this before. Some military brat tagging along with a parent. Some bored kid sneaking out of the family RV parked too close to the perimeter. Harmless curiosity. But then the boy stepped forward. Not timidly, not apologetically. He walked right up to the rusty table where the M110 sniper rifle sat resting on its bipod. His hands hovered over the weapon like they'd done it before, like muscle memory was waiting for permission. An instructor, Corporal Reeves, moved to block him with a chuckle. Sorry, kid. That's not a Nerf gun. Move along before someone gets yelled at. But the boy didn't move. Instead, he said a single sentence, one that shouldn't have made sense coming from someone his age. Wind's coming, 5 left. Low pressure. You'll need to compensate or you'll shoot 3 inches off at 300. Silence. Reeves blinked. What did you just say? The boy looked up, eyes calm. Your spotter missed it. No one laughed this time. The colonel straightened slightly. Something about the way the boy had said it. No bravado, no smugness, just fact. Like he was reading a label, like he belonged there. Where's your dad, son? The colonel asked, voice more curious than commanding. I came alone, the boy said. My mom's base personnel. She said I could walk if I stayed inside the wire. That explained the jacket maybe, not the language, not the tone. All right, Reeves muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Tell you what, kid. You can try just for fun, but 1 shot. That's it. And no touching the safety till I give the go. They expected fumbling, shaking hands, a struggle to even lift the rifle. What they saw instead was the boy adjusting the scope with a single fluid motion. He dropped his cheek to the stock, settled into prone position as naturally as breathing. His fingers danced across the adjustments. Windage, elevation, 0 shift as if he'd been trained on this model for months, and then he missed. The shot cracked across the range. The target didn't drop. Reeves exhaled in relief. The squad behind him smirked, already ready to reload their mockery. But the boy didn't move. He kept his eye to the scope. His finger didn't leave the trigger. Too high, he murmured. Scope's off. It's not mine. Reeves opened his mouth about to end the game when the boy fired again and again and again. By the 6th shot, the sand behind the target was dust. By the 7th, the target itself, metal, not cardboard, jerked and clanged against the post. 8th hit dead center. 9th snapped the zipline holding the target in place. The 10th, no one could tell what had hit because everyone had frozen. The range fell quiet. Even the colonel had stepped forward slowly, arms uncrossed, squinting. The boy stood up, no swagger, no smile. He set the rifle back on the table and looked at no one. Reeves stepped forward, hands trembling just slightly as he reached for the weapon. That's when he saw it carved faintly into the left side of the stock, almost invisible unless the light hit it right. Kill count 48. Not scratched, not drawn in pen, professionally etched, smoothed over, worn down from time. The Marines behind him murmured, "Whose rifle was this?" "It's not ours." "Not from the range inventory." The colonel was silent. His eyes never left the boy. "Who gave you this?" he asked. "My uncle," the boy said. "Name?" The boy hesitated, and that was the first time his hands shook. "I don't know his real name. They called him Ghost." The colonel's jaw tightened. One of the Marines made a choked noise. Because Ghost wasn't a nickname. It wasn't folklore. It was a call sign, a buried one. S-Team Archives. Unconfirmed, disavowed, but known to a select few who had seen the mission logs that weren't supposed to exist. The boy turned and walked away, not waiting for permission. Past the tent line, past the range boundary. No one followed. No one could. Not until they figured out what they had just seen, and more importantly, what it meant. They didn't talk about it immediately. Not the colonel, not Reeves, not any of the Marines still standing on the range, their rifles slung loose, drills forgotten. For a full 2 hours, the usual rhythm of base training resumed, except no one mentioned the shot. No one asked where the boy had gone, and no one touched the sniper rifle still lying on the table with its ghost number etched into the stock. It felt radioactive. Colonel Vance was a man who prided himself on discernment. He could tell the difference between a stage show and a moment that would ripple outward for years. And this wasn't theater. The way the kid adjusted for wind and recoil, the zeroing pattern, the rapid recalibration after the first miss, all of it pointed to conditioning, not guessing. Someone had trained him, but no one on this base could explain who. He requested the range footage. It wasn't even logged. No one had filed a civilian access alert, no timestamp, no authorization tag, as if the cameras blinked on only long enough to capture what they weren't supposed to. Reeves came to him that evening, quiet, a file in his hands. "Sir," he said. "I checked our records. That rifle isn't ours. No serial match in our storage. No requisition forms, no missing reports." Vance looked up from the silent monitor feed, still paused on the moment the boy stood up after his 10th shot. "Where was it stored?" Reeves hesitated. "Technically, it wasn't. It was in the back of Storage Bay 6, wrapped in canvas, no tag, buried under 2 decommissioned field mounts. Looks like it's been untouched for years. And no one noticed a kill count etched into it. We all assumed it was ceremonial, some retirement piece, but that kind of engraving, it's not casual, sir. I ran the pattern. The mark lines up with a very specific engraving style used only once on a rumored batch of weapons issued for Operation Dry Veil." Vance narrowed his eyes. "That ops redacted." "Exactly." The silence deepened. Later that night, Vance accessed a secure channel. He didn't call command. He called someone else. Someone listed only by code clearance. "What did you see?" the voice asked immediately. No greeting. "A child, 8, maybe 9, shot an M110 like he was born holding it." "Left-handed or right?" "Right." "Adjusted windage before the shot." "Fired 10 rounds. 9 direct, 1 miss." "Used ghost compensation." There was a long pause. "And the weapon kill count?" 48, another pause. "Sharper this time." "Where is the boy now?" "He walked out." "Did you follow?" No. And I won't unless I have to. Good. You're smart. Vance ended the call without another word. He knew what this was now. Not a story for the news, not even for internal reports. This was one of those fractures in protocol where the truth was too sharp to handle. You could only watch where it leaked, but the leak didn't stay quiet. Will this boy's secret change everything? 2 days later, during a live fire seal demonstration attended by dignitaries, a distant set of metal clangs rang out across the auxiliary range, perfectly timed, perfectly spaced. The instructors turned. The targets at 600 m had been taken down mid-drill. Not by accident, not by chance. Each shot split-seconded between official fire commands, threading through gaps like someone was writing in Morse. Reeves checked the scope from the tower. "Sir," he muttered, "it's him." They didn't find him immediately, but someone found a crumpled paper left on the table where the M110 had been. It was a sketch, a diagram of the range, wind directions mapped out in concentric arcs, notes in handwriting too steady for a child. At the bottom, one phrase written in lowercase, "Tell Ghost, I remember." The colonel stood there a long time, the paper in his hand, the Marine team whispering behind him. When he turned, his face had lost its usual edge. He looked almost reverent. He knew what this meant now. This wasn't just some savant kid with a talent for shooting. This wasn't even about the rifle. Someone, Ghost, had trained this boy with a purpose. And whoever Ghost was, he'd made sure the child could deliver a message louder than any bullet, one that no one watching would forget. And the message wasn't over yet, because Vance wasn't the only one who'd seen the video. Somehow, no one knew how, it had reached someone else, someone higher, and that person wasn't laughing. They were coming. No one noticed the Black Hawk at first. The base was too busy processing a delayed convoy and running the usual drills. But those in the watchtower would later swear they never got a transponder signal. No comms, no call sign, just a dark mad helicopter dipping below radar range and slicing through the air like it belonged in another theater entirely. It hovered for 5 seconds above the auxiliary tarmac, then touched down like a blade sliding into its sheath. 2 men stepped out. No insignia, no names, just simple khaki flight suits and cold stares that scanned every face like they were reading files instead of people. The first words they spoke went straight to the colonel's office. "We need to verify an incident at the southern range. It involves a minor." Colonel Vance didn't ask who they were. He'd seen enough eyes like theirs back when he was stationed near Langley. These weren't SEALs. These weren't Delta. They weren't even proper military. They were something else. And whatever that something else was, it outranked everything on this base, including him. They followed a silent escort across the gravel path to the firing line where the boy had taken his shots the day before. The table was still there, though moved aside. The ground hadn't been cleaned yet, footprints still pressed into the dust, cartridge casings still half buried in the sand. The air smelled faintly of oil and scorched powder. One of the men knelt down, ran his gloved hand over a set of markings in the dirt, then turned toward the distant metal target, still riddled with holes. He didn't speak. The second man opened a small black case, pulled out a tablet, and tapped through encrypted files. A single photo loaded, blurry, frame captured from a surveillance feed. A boy, face turned, fingers curled around the scope of a large sniper rifle. Behind him, almost out of frame, an older figure, adult female, tactical gear, kneeling. Her face was turned just enough to show the line of her jaw, but not enough to identify her, just enough to suggest something else. Protective posture, instinct, like she wasn't coaching the boy, but shielding him. The man tapped the screen once more. The image zoomed there on the woman's shoulder. An old patch washed out, black and silver. Ghost Division. The other man stood. "Confirmed," he said quietly. "That's her." The colonel froze. The woman in the photo had been declared Kia 4 years ago. No dog tags were recovered. No body ever found. Just a shredded convoy, a few bloodied uniforms, and radio silence from a region too hot for formal retrieval. "You're telling me she's alive?" Vance finally asked. The man didn't answer. He simply dropped a sealed envelope onto the table, then turned and walked toward the Black Hawk. The rotor blades began to spin. No names, no salutes, no clearance shown. They left the base exactly as they arrived in silence. Inside the envelope were 3 things: the photo, a GPS coordinate, and a list of kill counts beside unidentified locations, all marked confirmed. No explanations, no signatures, just at the bottom of the page, handwritten in faded ink: "He's not alone." That night, the colonel didn't sleep. He stared at the printout until the numbers began to mean something he didn't want to acknowledge. Because if what he suspected was true, if that boy had been trained by someone the world thought was dead, then every assumption they'd made about that shot, that rifle, that record was just the surface. The boy hadn't performed a miracle. He'd followed instructions. And whoever gave those instructions had trained ghosts. The next morning, the boy came back. No one saw him enter. No gate cameras, no vehicle logs. He was just there, standing on the edge of the range in the same oversized camo jacket, rifle strapped to his back, face calm, almost unreadable. The Marines didn't approach him this time. Not after what they'd seen, not after the whispers. Some said he was the son of a sniper who once taught SEALs without ever wearing a uniform. Others claimed he had a photographic memory and trained in some rogue program for child operatives. Though no one could prove such a program ever existed. But the colonel knew better. He walked out to the boy himself, slow, deliberate, as if approaching something ancient and sacred. The kid didn't flinch, didn't look away, just stood there, steady like he'd been waiting. Vance nodded toward the rifle. "You cleaned it?" "Yes," the boy answered. His voice wasn't soft. It was clear, controlled, and adjusted the 0. The winds shifted since yesterday. The colonel inhaled slowly. That level of awareness at that age. No normal child had that. Not even some recruits. He gestured toward the bench, but the boy didn't move toward it. "I'm not here to shoot," he said. "Then why are you here?" the colonel asked. The boy turned slightly and looked toward the far ridgeline, the one just beyond the range's limits, where the air shimmered above the desert rocks and the old observation tower cast long shadows at dusk. "She said you'd come," the boy murmured. "That when the wrong people started paying attention, you'd understand." "Understand what?" "That I'm not the message." The colonel's breath caught. "I'm the warning." Silence. It stretched between them like a wire. And that's when the colonel saw it. Not just the posture, not just the discipline, but the presence. Like this child was operating on frequencies the rest of them couldn't hear. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to prove a thing. He was just waiting. Vance looked again at the patch stitched clumsily onto the sleeve, a circle blank inside, but lined with thread so black it looked like a hole in the fabric of reality itself. "Where is she now?" the colonel asked. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he stepped past Vance, walked to the end of the range, and knelt behind the table once more, not to fire, but to place the rifle down gently as if returning something borrowed. He stood, saluted without words, then turned and walked toward the wire fence, vanishing in the heat haze before anyone could stop him. The range officers tried to review the security footage. There was nothing. No entry, no exit, just static, and a brief flicker of an old logo burned onto one corrupted frame. Ghost Division active when forgotten. That was the moment the colonel stopped asking questions. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come with clearance. Sometimes it walks onto your range and beats your best record by instinct just to remind you that legends aren't always history. Sometimes they're training their successors. And this time the successor had a name, but no one knew it yet. They didn't talk about it officially, not in reports, not in meetings, and definitely not in the after-action logs. The footage of the boy was scrubbed. The incident was marked as a training anomaly. The rifle returned to the armory was inexplicably missing 2 weeks later, checked out under a badge number that didn't exist. The bullet holes in the far targets were welded shut. The instructor's clipboard was burned. But the memory that stayed. It sank into the corridors like heat into concrete. Silent, invisible, permanent. The next morning, Colonel Vance walked alone to the base command tent. No assistant, no guards. He keyed in a code older than the building itself and retrieved a box buried under 3 layers of biometric clearance. He hadn't touched it in years. Inside, a black folder labeled in embossed silver font with 2 words no one dared speak in public anymore. Ghost Division. He didn't open it. He just placed the folder at the center of the conference table where the senior brass would be seated in 45 minutes. He didn't plan to explain. Didn't need to. All he would say when they arrived was this: he beat the record. And he didn't even try. That's what haunted him. Because real shooters, even the best, show effort. You can see it in their knuckles, their breathing, their micro-corrections. But the boy, he had moved like he already knew the outcome, like he wasn't aiming, just fulfilling a pattern already set in motion by someone else. And someone else had taught him. The sealed photo remained in Vance's drawer. The one with the woman beside him, just out of frame, half shielded from view. They hadn't found her, but they hadn't tried either, because those who knew where to look also knew what happened to people who asked questions about that unit. The Ghost Division hadn't been officially disbanded. It had simply disappeared. No ceremony, no discharge papers, just silence. The kind that's enforced by blood. And now somehow that silence had resurfaced in the form of a boy who shouldn't have known how to breathe in rhythm with a sniper's heartbeat. Who shouldn't have known how to adjust for a 30-knot crosswind? Who shouldn't have even been on that range, but who had known and who had performed under pressure in front of trained veterans, instructors, and officers, and left them speechless. The instructor who laughed at him, he filed for reassignment 2 days later. Not out of shame, but because every time he looked at the table where the boy had knelt, he felt like he was staring at an altar, like he'd witnessed something sacred, something that didn't belong in drills or manuals or training slideshows. The 3 Marines who'd scoffed at him behind the barrier, they stopped talking about firearms altogether. One of them, Corporal Rains, reportedly turned down a sniper school offer he'd been chasing for 6 months. If that kid's out there, he told his CO, I don't belong behind the scope. The Humvee driver who transported the extra rounds, he called his brother, a former analyst, and asked a question no enlisted man should ever ask. What happens if a Kia isn't real? His brother hung up. The ripples weren't measurable in paperwork, but you could see them in posture, in silence, in the way the colonel started locking his door for the first time in years. And then came the letter. It arrived in a black envelope, sealed with wax. No stamp, no return address, just a burn mark across the fold. Inside a folded paper, no greeting, no signature, just one sentence. He's ready. That was all. No date, no details. But the meaning was clear. Whoever she was, the one who trained him, had chosen this moment, this place for a reason. Not to prove a point, not to impress anyone, but to make them remember. To remind the military machine that no matter how far it advanced, no matter how many drones or algorithms or simulations it deployed, there were still ghosts walking the earth. People trained not for medals, but for silence, and one of those ghosts had passed on the fire. In the weeks that followed, nothing was the same. The range officers started redesigning their qualification metrics. They didn't say it aloud, but everyone knew it was because of the shot. The shot that hit a target no one had touched in 8 years. A target placed so far out it was half buried under time itself. He'd hit it clean, straight through the metal. The colonel stopped giving speeches. He became quieter, sharper. He reviewed personnel files at night, staring at the old missions, the blacked-out names, the unconfirmed deaths. He started noticing patterns, patches, call signs, kill ratios that didn't make sense. And always in the back of his mind, the same question. Who trained the boy? Then one night, he found something in the base's secure archive. A file half corrupted, barely legible. But there it was, an audio log from 4 years ago. A whisper in the dark captured by accident during a medevac transmission from a no-name ridge outside Kandahar. He's not ready yet, but when he is, I'll send him. He replayed that line 37 times, and every time he did, he heard something beneath the words. Not menace, not defiance, but purpose. Like this was never about revenge or making a statement. It was preparation. The boy hadn't appeared randomly. He had been sent. And the lesson he delivered wasn't about marksmanship. It was about remembering what kind of people still walked quietly in the corners of the world. The kind who didn't need rank or uniforms or credit. The kind who trained children not to fight, but to watch, to learn, to wait until the world became unsteady enough to need them again. And now it had begun. The colonel left the base a week later. No press release, no reassignment, just a quiet departure. Some say he was called up to a black program no one admits exists. Others say he followed the GPS coordinates that came with the photo. But one thing was clear. The boy was never seen on that range again. And yet late at night on the edge of the base, instructors still swore they sometimes heard a single round echo in the distance. Just one. No follow-up, no confirmation, just a perfect shot from nowhere. And the smell of scorched powder in the wind. They never found out his full name. Not the instructors, not the base security team, not even the colonel. There had been a name on the intake form, scribbled hastily, like someone filling out paperwork they didn't expect to be read. Eli. No last name, no ID number, no birth date, just Eli, printed in small, even letters. Below it, under legal guardian, there had been only one word, classified. Nobody questioned it. Not because they didn't care, but because by the time anyone thought to ask, the boy was already gone. And yet, in the weeks that followed, he stayed. Not physically, not visibly, but in the cadence of drills, in the silence that crept into the firing range every time a new recruit stepped up. In the subtle change of tone instructors used when explaining trajectories or timing or breath control. The memory of him had settled into the gravel, into the spent brass scattered across the dust, into the long jagged shadow cast by that rusted table where he had knelt, oversized rifle steady in hands too small for the trigger guard. Eyes too young to have known death and yet filled with something that none of them could explain. Something ancient. And it wasn't just what he had done that haunted them. It was how he had done it. There was no hesitation in that shot, no second breath, no recoil flinch, no celebration. Just a slow exhale, a pull, a crack of thunder, and the impossible. The round had traveled over 1,000 meters, curved slightly left under wind pressure, and punched through steel that had rusted untouched since the last SEAL had missed it 6 years ago. It hadn't been set up for show. It wasn't part of the test, but the boy had aimed for it anyway and hit. After that, there were no more jokes, no more dismissive smirks when a recruit hesitated, no more rolled eyes when someone stumbled through their first shot. Because if a child, a literal child, could step into the arena and make time freeze, then no one had any excuse for underestimating anyone ever again. The colonel, though he never admitted it, knew that the moment had changed him. He had joined the military at 19, too young to know fear, and too fast with a trigger to be taught patience. He had survived Fallujah, buried friends in Kandahar, called in airstrikes that lit up entire ridgelines, and spent 2 years embedded with a shadow unit that didn't have a name. He had seen monsters in the dark. He had been one, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the stillness in that boy's posture. The way he breathed, the way his shoulders never tensed, the way the shot had come not from anger or panic or pride, but from a place beyond emotion, a place of absolute clarity, and it broke something inside the colonel that day. Or maybe it repaired something. He stopped yelling after that, stopped giving speeches laced with bravado. He started spending more time alone, reviewing old dossiers, calling in favors, asking questions no one wanted asked. And that's when the stories started coming in. Rumors mostly. A recon team in Tunisia swore they saw a child's footprints in the sand near an abandoned compound after an ambush no one could explain. A sniper team in Alaska intercepted a burst signal piggybacking on a weather balloon frequency encrypted with a code used only by a black ops unit that supposedly disbanded after Operation Hushed Echo. The signal contained 5 words. The wind is still watching. A week later, a single casing was found, lodged in the bark of a tree overlooking a high-value target's last known position. 1 round, clean shot. No entry wound ever found. The stories piled up, one by one, quiet, unconfirmed, but enough to build a pattern. The colonel brought them all to a retired general once stationed at Groom Lake. The general didn't look surprised. He simply stared at the photos, the files, the fragments, then opened a drawer and pulled out a patch, faded, black on black. No emblem, no text, just stitching, barely visible, unless you knew what you were looking for. It was the Ghost Division's mark. The ones who train without being seen, the general said. The ones who don't graduate, they vanish because that's the point. When the colonel asked what that meant for the boy, the general didn't answer. He just handed him a box. Locked, fingerprint sealed, heavy. On the top, engraved in dull steel, was a number. Number 313. You won't open that, the general said. Not yet. Not until he makes himself known again. And when he does, don't try to reach him. Just stay out of his way. The colonel didn't ask why, because by then he already knew. The boy wasn't a prodigy. He was a legacy trained by someone. Maybe a mother, maybe a ghost, maybe both, who had once walked through battlefields unseen and left nothing but silence behind. Someone who understood that true power wasn't about medals or ranks or records. It was about restraint. Because the boy hadn't fired again after that day, not on the range, not during the applause, not even when the instructor knelt beside him and whispered, "Where the hell did you learn that?" He had just stood, dusted off his oversized jacket, looked across the sand, and said one thing. She told me I'd know when. And then he left. No ride, no escort. Just disappeared into the line of parked vehicles, then into the heat shimmer beyond the gate. Cameras didn't catch him. No one did. And maybe that was the point. Because some lessons aren't meant to be documented. Some truths aren't meant to be spoken. Sometimes all the world needs is a single impossible moment to remind it. The quiet ones, the ones they laugh at, ignore, dismiss. They are the ones carrying something old, something forgotten. And if they ever decide to stop holding back, the world won't get a warning, just a whisper, just a shot, just silence. If this story moved you, don't scroll just yet. On this channel, we honor the ones no one saw coming. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who still believes in quiet strength and unspoken heroes. This was Graceful Valor Stories, where the forgotten stories finally get told. Until next time, stay sharp.